Sometimes I just look up at the stars at night and wonder, are we alone out there? I've asked myself this for most of my life. I want to believe, but trust no one. Tonight I give you 3 allegedly true stories of alien sightings. The following passage is taken from the notebook of Officer Miles Bradbury. 17th of April 2013. We were called out to investigate a forest fire. Of course, when we got there, we saw government agents who merely told us to secure a perimeter and gave us fake details to spite to anyone who tried to come close. My close colleague Jake and I were a little annoyed by this. We passed the tedious hours chatting. It didn't take long for the government agents to come up during conversation. "So, what do you think they're doing back there?" I asked. "Weapons testing, I bet." "I doubt that it's weapon testing. It would count for the smoke, but why do that in the middle of the forest? Why not a moor or out at sea, somewhere safe?" "You're right. Weapons testing doesn't really make sense. I might go take a look." "If they'll let you." My friend was silent after that. I wish I had known what was going on inside his head. I might have tried to stop him if I had. The next day, he wasn't at his post, so I stood alone for the entire morning shift. During my lunch break, he approached me. He was different. It wasn't just the fact that his clothes and face were dirty and covered in some kind of slime. It wasn't just how exhausted he was, or even that he was shaking. It was the look in his eyes. I've never seen anything like it. The only way I could describe it was there was a madness in his eyes. A frantic desperation to do something, constantly at war with an intense, debilitating fear of actually doing it. Between his gazed gasps of breath, he uttered the words, "It's an alien." I'd have laughed if it weren't for his appearance. This was no laughing matter. "What?" I started. "You mean like little gray men?" He shook his head. "No, not like that. These were something bigger. Not size, but it was just greater than us, more powerful. We are ants compared to it. Humanity is nothing. We're nothing." He started to laugh and cry and shake. I backed away uneasily. The next moments I'll never forget. He grabbed my porcelain mug from the table, poured the contents onto the floor, shattered it against the table, and rammed the jagged remains into his own throat. I rushed forward and tried to stop him, but it was too late. He was bleeding profusely. He gripped hold of my hand so tight that it hurt and didn't let go until he had finished choking to death on his own blood. I didn't move for the next 20 minutes. Even then, the others found us. I was under suspicion for his death. Of course I was. When the government types saw the slime on his clothes, they were even more eager to convict me. I was determined to get to the bottom of this. I didn't think I could sleep again until I had. They took me to a spare room and kept a guard posted, with orders not to let me as much as move. Of course, he told me in confidence that he didn't believe I was guilty. I desperately took advantage of this. When enough time has passed and he began to grow complacent, I got up and beat him unconscious. Or I killed him. I'm not really sure. I didn't even stop to think about it long enough to feel any kind of guilt or remorse. I had to get to the smoke no matter what. After several minutes of trekking, I started to feel vulnerable, and not just from the possibility of getting caught by my fellow police officers or the government. I felt like a million eyes were staring at me with killer intent. I felt like every molecule of air around me was a predator so dangerous that preyed on humans. My dead colleague's words came back to me. I literally felt like an ant staring up at a human's boot. The feeling only grew stronger the closer I got to the smoke. My chest was aching, my spine was tingling, my forehead was burning. The symptoms of my anxiety were so severe, I felt like I was walking through a desert. I had to breathe slowly and deeply to calm myself down, but it still wasn't enough. Every step I took was a great effort. In through the nose, out through the mouth, one foot in front of the other. I finally made it to the clearing and I saw what was causing the smoke. When you see UFOs on TV, they look like discs or triangles or flashing lights. All things you've seen before. What was in front of me, I thought without a doubt was a UFO, even though I'd never seen anything like it. It was a craft such as one that humanity would never be capable of making. I had little knowledge of science, but I knew this craft was capable of traveling past the speed of light. Just looking at it, I realized that everything we think we know about physics is completely wrong. I couldn't go any further. I turned back into the forest and sat down. That's when I wrote this. I wanted to uncover why my friend died. But now, if any of you government people find this notebook, keep it to yourselves. I don't want anyone else reading this. I don't want the truth getting out. Humanity is not ready for this, and it never will be. After I've written this, and once I've gathered my courage, I'm going to take a look inside the UFO. The following passage is taken from the notes of Dr. Osman, 9th of July 2013. Miles Bradbury isn't too strange a case. He constantly harps on about seeing an alien. It's when he goes in detail that things start to get interesting. Of course, most of the time he just babbles and stammers on his entire interview, but when he talks about the alien, he describes it as being beautiful, perfect, gigantic, but not in size, and other such phrases. He says it is of higher form of life than humanity, and could destroy us with little effort if required. In fact, during a few interviews he stopped here and merely starts screaming, "Humanity is nothing," over and over at the top of his lungs until we sedate him. He shows no signs of brain damage or physical trauma, no history of episodes or disorders. This was all caused by some kind of psychological trauma the night before he was brought in, after killing 2 fellow officers. This patient has very little chance of recovery. It's troubling. There's seemingly no cause for this condition. I literally cannot think of a single reason on this earth that a man could snap this violently. In 2009, I went to some carnival in my area with my dad just for the heck of it. The last thing I did there is play that game where you throw darts at the balloons. If you've ever been to a single fair or carnival, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Anyways, I played that game and got the small prize. An alien doll. When I first got it, I loved the doll to death for some reason. However, that love is now replaced with fear, as you will see later. So we brought the lime green colored alien doll back to my house. I hung it up on one of those knobs on my closet and barely even touched it for 3 years. It was just hanging there. It was in the exact same pose for 3 years. I forgot it was even there until recently. Here I am now. an 8th grader heading to high school in a few months, instead of an energetic 6th grader fresh out of elementary school. Always busy with computer games, the internet, anime, American animation, things like that. These days, I just spend all day every day on my computer, only standing up and walking a couple times each day just to either go use the bathroom, get some soda, eat something, or go to sleep. Besides my stepmom being a nuisance sometimes, all was well in my world. This is what I thought. Within the last few months, I started getting these eerie and very, very strange dreams. I've gotten ones with characters from popular creepypastas hunting me down, satanic messages, the general sense of feeling alone and defenseless in a harmful environment, and so on and so forth. The most recent one of these dreams is where I decided to spend all night watching old Cartoon Network show like Kids Next Door, Ed, Ed and Eddie, and Dexter's Lab. All around midnight, the VHSs I was watching them on started making very distorted visuals with the red tint and missing animations, sometimes making it look like one character's murdering another. It got to the point where I just started feeling uncomfortable and decided to turn off the television and go back upstairs to sleep. When I turned off the TV though, instead of turning off, it would show a black and white still image of a certain character from one of the shows I was watching. No pupils in their eyes, no mouth, staring straight at me. I kept trying to turn off the TV, each attempt making a new image appear, until finally, for some reason, it started showing a crystal clear video of a palm tree with a face, talking in a distorted voice that sounded like instructions on how to hang yourself. At that point, I became hysterical and just started running up the stairs. That was when I woke at 3 in the morning. The first thing I see is that alien-shaped doll hanging on my closet. This was how every night I had a weird dream went. I have the dream, and then I wake up at an absurdly early hour with the alien-shaped doll being the first thing I see when I wake up. This is only on nights where I didn't position my computer chair to where it's blocking the alien doll though, so I'm starting to think that it's somehow connected to these dreams, channeling them into my mind. I'm going to do a few experiments and see if my hypothesis is correct. If it is, I'm going to destroy it, because these dreams are making me lose sleep and causing me large amounts of stress. I don't know why, but I get a weird feeling that I was being watched while typing this entire thing, even though there's no one else in the room. May 6, 2012. Last night before I went to sleep, I tried putting the doll in a drawer. Then I purposely left the computer chair in a position where I could see the doll if it were still up on the closet. No lucid dreams so far. My hypothesis is correct. This all began with a family trip to Las Vegas. The year was 2009 and we decided to go on a little vacation for my 20th birthday. Now that I think about it, why couldn't my parents have just waited a year and made the Las Vegas trip at my 21st birthday? Going to Las Vegas at 20 years old is like going to an amusement park when you're just too short to get on any of the good roller coasters. I'm a single child, so it would just be my mother and father and myself. As residents of Southern California, we decided to make the drive out there in our minivan instead of paying for airfare. Not to mention avoiding the horrifying experience of the Los Angeles International Airport. Anyone who's made that drive before knows there's not much to look at, nothing but desert and hot asphalt. We stopped in the small town of Baker, California, for a little bit of food at a Del Taco which had a rated C by the FDA, some ridiculously overpriced gasoline, and a glance at the world's largest thermometer. It happened to be 108 Fahrenheit that day, which is about average for early summer since the town is so close to Death Valley. The conversations on the road trip consisted mainly of my dad and I making Simpsons jokes and references, none of which my mom understood, or my parents talking amongst themselves about family matters that I didn't really care about. I had an old Game Boy with me at the time, so I wasn't completely bored out of my mind while my parents were talking. The total drive time from our house to Vegas was about 6.5 hours. We got to the Strip and found our hotel. We were staying at Circus. Not the most luxurious hotel on the Strip, but I had no complaints. It was a nice little 4-day, 3-night vacation where we did all the usual Las Vegas kinds of things. But that's not what I'm here to talk about. It was the 3rd day of our vacation and we didn't really have anything planned out for that day. At first, we were just going to wander around the Strip and see if anything interesting caught our eye. But my mom had a migraine headache that day, so my dad and I decided to go on our own and leave the city while she rested. We were both very fascinated by the whole UFO phenomenon, and we already knew the legendary secret base known as Area 51 was about 85 miles north of the city of Las Vegas. So we planned a little adventure to go up that desolate Nevada Highway 375, otherwise known as the Extraterrestrial Highway, and head north. We just planned to look around a little bit, then get some pictures at the borderline of the base. I find the concept of a legendary secret hilarious, by the way. We knew there really wasn't much to see other than signs telling you that this was government property and they had the right to shoot on sight if you tried trespassing. But we felt that the alone would be a good photo opportunity and that it would just be cool to be able to say, "Hey, I've been to Area 51. So we drove around for about an hour and a half seeing literally no traffic, which honestly was a little unsettling, though not expected. We got as close to the base as we could, got out of the car and found that it was exactly as we expected. There was a dirt road that was blocked off with those aforementioned signs and a locked gate. The peculiar thing was that there wasn't any fences or walls blocking entry to any of the forbidden areas. Just these orange markers sticking out of the ground marking the territory. I guess they just feel that since no one has the balls to go in there, why build a fence? We could see all the equipment they had for spotting curious onlookers such as ourselves. There were strange devices sticking out of the ground that I'm sure are used for things such as detecting oncoming vehicles, thermal surveillance, and all sorts of video cameras. Before we knew it, I noticed that there was a white truck sitting on top of a hill with 2 men equipped with binoculars inside watching us. I'm sure they were just there to make sure we didn't do anything stupid and to show us that this was serious business. I bet they get people out there like us all the time. Needless to say, we didn't do anything stupid. We just took some pictures of ourselves in front of the "We'll shoot on sight" sign, looking around a little bit and decided to head back because it was starting to get dark. The problem was that it shouldn't have been getting dark, and it was getting dark fast, unnaturally fast. When we got to the border of the base, it was around 3 p.m., so we should have had at least 5 hours of light, but it felt like we've only been there for about 45 minutes. My dad looked at his watch and saw that indeed the watch said it was 3:43 p.m. The only thing wrong with that was that his watch had stopped ticking. We discussed this strange occurrence briefly, but then just decided to get in the car and get going. We got into the van, sat down, fastened our seatbelts, and my dad turned the key in the ignition. The engine started fine, however, every electronic component of the car was not functioning. We couldn't get the lights on, the radio wasn't working, and the digital clock face was completely blank. At this point, we were starting to panic. The car was in perfect driving order, but we had no headlights and the sun was quickly dipping below the mountaintops. The decision we made was just to drive as fast as we could possibly go as long as we had visibility. If we got pulled over by the cops, that would be our best case scenario because then we would at least have some help. Getting a speeding ticket, even a big one, would be a small price to pay. We of course thought to try our cell phones, but just like all the electronics in the car, they were completely dead. Let me give you a little recap of our situation. My dad is now driving like a bat out of hell, going at least 110 miles per hour down a completely abandoned highway in a minivan trying to get back to civilization before the sun disappears below the horizon at what we think is around 3:55 p.m. My dad is completely focused on the road at this point, but I'm starting to see things out the windows to the right side of the car. I don't want to tell him because if he looked, he'd probably flip the van and kill us both. Honestly, I can't tell you what I was seeing. There were streaks of lights of various colors, things that looked like fireworks imploding instead of exploding in utter silence. Some very large pulsating lights that were just kind of teetering back and forth in the sky, and other things my vocabulary simply cannot convey. These were definitely unidentified flying objects, but not the types of things that I think would constitute any kind of alien spacecraft. It was at this point just another strange occurrence started. The sun that was so quickly disappearing behind the mountains seemed to stop just below the horizon. It was odd. The sun was completely obscured by the mountains, but we could still see it glow behind them. We were in some kind of endless twilight. As strange as it was beneficial to us, because at least in this situation, we had the visibility to continue moving on and hopefully get back to the city so we could just put this crazy clusterfuck behind us. Something else I found comforting was that those strange lights and I was seeing earlier had vanished. Our newfound optimism was, however, short-lived. We've been driving twice the speed limit for over an hour now, but we haven't seemed to have made any progress. At this rate, we should have at least seen some sort of buildings or other motorists. Actually, when I think about it, at the rate we were going, we should have already reached Vegas. Instead, all we were seeing was the same abandoned highway in an eerie orange tint that we had been looking at this entire time with no recognizable landmarks for bearings. It's not like we could have made a wrong turn or anything like that earlier. The entire trip was a straight line. Something was seriously wrong, and we both knew it. We just kept continuing down this seemingly endless road with no real semblance of time, but then we finally saw something that was different. Way off in the distance, we could see something large blocking the road in both lanes. As we got closer, we identified the obstruction as several large vehicles parked sideways. It was an apparent military blockade. There were 2 large Humvees and a single canopy-topped trooper carrier. As we approached, my dad began slowing down. When we started getting close, the men manning their particular posts started shining their incredibly bright spotlights in our direction from the tops of the vehicles. We then heard a loud, deep voice over a loudspeaker.
"Shut your engine down and keep your hands where I can see them."
We obliged, of course, my dad turning the car off and both of us stuck our hands out of the respective windows. It was at that point that we started seeing the soldiers. They seemed to be wearing normal military uniforms, though with bright lights it was hard to tell because they were heavily silhouetted. One thing I did find strange was that they were all wearing gas masks. Something about this just didn't seem right. Nothing about this entire situation made sense. Why would they be blocking off the road going away from the base? Why had the sun apparently been frozen just beyond the horizon? And what were those lights I had been seeing? I counted 6 soldiers of various height and build. They all seemed to be carrying standard M4 assault rifles as one would expect, but there was just something about them that seemed off, that point accentuated by the gas masks. We were approached by one soldier on each side of the car. Each of our windows was met with a soldier, and the one on my father's side asked in a stern, somewhat warped-sounding voice, "What business do you have being here?" My dad answered nervously, "We're just trying to get back to our hotel." The soldier in an even deeper, more warped-sounding voice replied, "Hotel? I don't know of any hotels around these parts." It was at this point I started feeling strange. Time and space seemed distorted. I looked at the soldier on my side of the car and noticed that he had no skin exposed whatsoever. I looked him dead in the eye, and all of a sudden I was having images appear in my mind's eye, thousands of them, all at once, my ears from within going crazy. I had never experienced anything so intense and overpowering in my life and doubt that I ever will again. I used all my energy just to try and stay conscious, but I couldn't hold out for long. The next thing I knew, it was early morning the next day. The sun had apparently set and risen as it always does, and my father and I regained consciousness together. We were still in our car with the car in motion, however now all the electronics were functioning properly. We were turning down the street that leads to our hotel. It seems as though my father had driven all the way back with no memory of it. He told me that he had a similar experience to what I did and also lost consciousness around the same time as me. The clock radio in the car said it was 6:18 a.m. My dad checked his analog time to confirm it, but it read out 1:15 as the time. It was off by over 5.5 hours, but it was ticking again. We didn't know what to say to each other. Neither of us could come close to comprehending what had happened that night. We made it back to the hotel room with my mom worried sick and us not knowing where to start to explain what the fuck just happened to us. We ended up just telling her that our car broke down on the highway, so we were stuck on the road all day waiting for help and had forgotten to charge our cell phones. So it wasn't until early that morning that a generous truck driver stopped and helped us to get our car in working order again. She was incredibly pissed, as she had every right to be, but she believed our story. It didn't feel right telling her what actually happened since we weren't even sure ourselves. My father and I still don't talk about that night with each other to this day. I'm not going to try to speculate on what exactly happened. Maybe we saw something we shouldn't have. Maybe the desert sun just does strange things to your mind. I will leave you with this small word of advice. If you pursue the mysterious,
you've got no one but yourself to blame if you find it.
My name is Ray, and I live in a small town in rural Oregon. Most of the men in town are loggers, and the women mostly work in the retail stores or restaurants, or simply stay-at-home moms. Not to sound sexist or anything, it's just how it is out here. Did I offend you? Too bad. Take that crap back to Liberalfornia. Anyways, I was driving with my wife and son down Highway 199 last Friday night after getting food and seeing a scary movie in theaters. I know, cliché, right? Anyhow, we were just talking about the movie, and the radio wasn't off. It was on a low volume to where it's on, but you're not really paying attention to it at the same time, if that makes any sense. It's pitch black out. I looked at the dashboard and it reads 10:15 p.m. There's not too many street lamps on the road as we're heading home, and all of a sudden, the radio starts freaking out. Crazy, windy, creaking, scratchy type noises are blasting out of the car speakers. Was the car radio malfunctioning? Or was it some kind of flashes of energy from deep space? Or maybe something like that from some satellite for fast radio bursts, better known as FRBs. It was so loud I turned the knob, but it didn't work. Then, all of a sudden, the car completely shuts off. Totally off, like lights out, engine off, and the brakes barely went to a stop on the road. So, here we are getting blasted by some kind of radio frequency and the car dies. Now we are stuck in the middle of the road in the pitch black of night like sitting ducks. I'm breathing heavy at this point, and I'm trying to figure out what is our next move. Then, this extremely bright light is beaming over our whole car in front of us, but yet more like above us at some angle pointing downwards at us, maybe 45 degrees. I shield my eyes and I scream to everyone to cover their eyes too. The noises in our radio get louder, so loud I cannot believe that they haven't blown by now. We all start screaming as we are trying to shield our eyes yet cover our ears all at the same time, and it hurts. It felt like forever, but in reality it was probably only 30 seconds when the light suddenly disappears and the car starts back on, and the radio is back to normal. In total shock, hyperventilating, I ask if everyone is okay. They both nod and I glanced at the clock and froze in shock. It read 11:15 p.m. What the hell? Where did an hour go? It's only been a couple of minutes max, including the noise and the car turning off. There's no way an hour passed by. I had my wife check her watch. Same thing. 11:15. Whatever happened to us was definitely not from this earth. There's no way we have any time-stopping technology, and even if I was off with time, it definitely wasn't a whole hour. I scratched my head in confusion, then I scratched the back of my neck as I put the car in the drive and started heading home. Wait, what are these two bumps on the back of my neck? I live in Oceanside, California. My roommate Brandon and I live in an apartment semi-close to the Marine Corps base called Camp Pendleton. They're always making noises at that base. We can hear and feel the bomb prototype crap that they be dropping on that base all the time in town. Sometimes it's annoying, especially at night when you're trying to go to sleep. Anyways, this happened last summer, and to this day, I cannot explain what I saw. What we saw. We both saw it. It was Saturday night. We were cooking up some custom steak fry casserole dish we kind of invented together, and was about to pop on a movie on the projector in the living room when I went out front to smoke a cigarette and gasped what I saw in the sky. I was looking north to where the base is, and I saw two goldish white lights flickering in the sky. They were huge. Knowing how far away they were around the base, the lights were really large and weren't moving. At first, I assumed fire. No, too high in the sky for that. I called Brandon over and he freaked out at the sight of them too, grabbing tightly at his dreads. Then, they both suddenly moved to a different area in the sky, but still in the same area. Whoa! What the hell is that? Then, all of a sudden, a third light pops out of nowhere near the other two lights, and this light is double the size of the other two, and it's a shiny dark red color. Dude, I'm hella freaking out right now, I said under my breath to Brandon. Brandon then laughs. He does that when he's stressed, or bad shit's about to happen. It's his fuck it attitude to keep him positive during bad situations. I should really try it sometime. I bet they'll be on the news claiming military air balloons or some shit, Brandon said, smiling. Yeah, I bet. That shit ain't no balloon, I responded. I never did hear about it on the news or the radio. I don't know what I saw, but I have a pretty good guess it is probably what the hell they're also doing over at Area 51 in Nevada, too. I may never get a true answer, but we know.
The truth is out there.
So if you're a hoo-ha Marine over at Camp Pendleton and happen to come across this video, leave a comment down below. Expose the truth. We want to believe. This happened to me last winter. I was up in my room checking out the stars and planets through my telescope out my window. My bedroom is on the second floor, and my house is really big, yet an old Victorian house in Joliet, Illinois. The snow was heavy that season, and my friends wanted to go out that night, but I hate the cold weather, honestly, so I made up some excuse just to stay home and chill in my room instead. I'm pretty introverted. I like to be alone most of the time. I'm more interested in space and everything out there than anything down here present on Earth, to be honest. I just don't like being around a lot of people. It was roughly around 9 p.m., and I was looking at Mars through my scope when I swore I saw a shooting star flying across the sky through my scope. I tried to find it and navigate it with my scope, and when I found it, I was shocked to see what I actually saw. It wasn't some shooting star, and it wasn't that far off into deep space like the planets and other stars are in faraway galaxies. This thing was close, like in our sky flying down towards land close. I shot back from my telescope and gasped, blinked hard, rubbing my eyes in disbelief and looking back at the object once again. This thing was getting bigger, which meant it was getting closer into our atmosphere. What should I do? I asked myself. Do I call the cops? Call NASA? Like I have their frickin' number or like it's online anyways. I laughed to myself. I decided to call my best friend Junior. He loves alien crap like I do, especially the movies. After telling him everything, he came over and was watching it with me in my room. We were super excited. Now, the object is becoming noticeable even without using the telescope. I think it's getting close to land here, Beavis, Junior said. That would be cool, I replied with a grin. I watched as the object suddenly crashed into the woods just outside my neighborhood. And the ground shook a little bit, but no fire, no flash, no anything. Just a shake like a little mini earthquake. We both rushed to my closet and grabbed a couple flashlights in our jackets and rushed downstairs and out the front door. Dude, we have to be the first to witness this. We're gonna be famous, I screamed excitedly. We ran as fast as we could. Why we didn't just grab our bikes? I guess it was just out of pure excitement. We raced in the woods in the direction I remember seeing the crash. We got really deep in those woods. There's miles and miles of forest deep back there, and this thing could be anywhere. About 15 minutes of searching, we come across this bright light through some trees in the far distance. The light was extremely bright and was flickering like some strobe light to give a better visual example. We proceeded with caution but did not stop or turn away as we saw it, like it was calling us to come closer. Then, I hear this voice clear as day, but it sounded like it was speaking inside my head, not out loud for the world to hear, and it said to me,
Come closer, youngling. I won't hurt you.
Did you hear that? I asked Junior.
Nah, hear what? Shh! We're getting close, be quiet, he responded.
Something was telling me to stop, so I did. Junior kept creeping closer. I tried to signal him to stop him, but he couldn't hear me with all the loud noise that was now in the woods from whatever was creating this bright light over the trees and hill. By now, he was over the hill into the light and I could no longer see him. I felt something was terribly wrong and I just knew it in my gut. I had to turn away. No, I need to get Junior and we both need to go. I started to walk slowly towards the light. The closer I got, the louder it became. I stopped. I had to take a break. I was freaking out, no lie. I then continued again, step by step. I got closer to the light. Once I reached the light, I then walked into it. It was almost like a smoke screen. Once you stepped through it, I could see the alien starship about 20 yards ahead of me. Whoa, I thought to myself. Where was Junior? I thought. He was nowhere to be found. I got goosebumps not only from the winter wind, but I was now terrified for what I had found. Then where was my friend? I kept walking closer to the object. There was red and green lights flashing across the ship's center like how our planes have it on the wings. I looked towards the ground by the ship and saw my friend lying lifeless, face down, naked in the dirt. His whole body was burnt to the crisp with extreme degrees non-imaginable. No! I screamed out, Junior! The smoke rose from his body, meaning it had just happened. But how? And by who? And then I saw it. The alien. It was standing underneath the craft and had some sort of big gun. I'm only assuming was some kind of flame launcher or something. God, it was ugly. That being was hideous looking. It was skinny with dark gray skin with large jet black eyes, and that's it. No clothing, nothing. I didn't pay attention to the details regarding how many fingers or toes. I had to get the hell out of there, and fast, before I became barbecue too.
Come closer,
it said again in my mind as I turned around and ran like hell in the opposite direction. I'm sure that gun isn't light, so I was hoping it couldn't chase me down on foot. Luckily, I was right. I reached back home after about 15 minutes or so, running like hell through the woods. I'm so lucky I didn't get lost on my way back, or I wouldn't be telling you this story. In 2004 or 2005, I was around 14 or 15 years old. I lived in the country of Southwest Virginia and was the typical country boy. My mom and stepdad had recently let me start raccoon hunting by myself, and that's what I was doing that night. As the sun was setting, I took the dogs and left for our hunting grounds maybe 2 miles away on foot, same as I had done before. When I got to the usual spot, I turned the dogs loose and waited. Nothing out of the ordinary for a few minutes. After a half an hour or so, still nothing. And this was somewhat strange, as we didn't have the best hounds, and if they didn't find a raccoon scent, they would strike a deer or rabbit or something, but nothing happened. I began to walk around calling for them, but I didn't get any response. when I noticed a red glow from the top of the ridgeline emanated from the holler. Now, this is a place way off the roads, just forest and cow pasture, no electrical power anywhere around. My first thought was the farmer must be clearing some brush and had a fire going, so I went to investigate and check it out to make sure it wasn't a fire being started. As I got closer to the top of the ridge, I get a sense of something is not right. I started to notice that there was no smell of smoke in the air, and the glow was not flickering the way a fire would be with flames dancing up and down. But what was really off about it was the color. It was not the warm, orangish red light from a fire, but intense, bright red. The best way I can describe it is how a stoplight on a dark corner casts an eerie red glow on everything. Or possibly brake lights. That was the color. Except for the amount of light I was seeing, it would require maybe 50 4x4 vehicles lined up with the brakes on. I mean, it's possible if a field party was happening, but I heard no music or noise. I was staring, trying to find an explanation for what it was, but I couldn't think of one. This is when I got scared. Really scared. I was carrying a 20-gauge single shotgun with birdshot, and I happened to have a few shells and buckshots with me, and slugs. I quickly loaded a slug and held 2 buckshot shells in my hand and prepared to defend myself. I turned and left for the long way home, sneaking and quietly as possible on the edge the entire way back. When I got back home, I told my mom and stepdad what had happened. My stepdad scolded me for leaving the dogs in the woods. He thought I got spooked and left, or I was just lazy and didn't want to go after them. He just didn't believe me. The dogs knew their way back home and was waiting for breakfast in their doghouse the next day, just an FYI. I went back to that holler in the daylight a day or two later looking for any evidence of what I had seen. I looked hard but found no blunt area from a fire, no flesh tire tracks, absolutely nothing out of the ordinary. About a week after this had happened to me, I woke up one night, walking into the living room, and my stepdad jumped up and said that he had seen that red light. He had been hunting not in the same place, but he was close by. He was standing with his light off, when suddenly, and without a sound, he had seen 3 bright flashes of light that lit everything around him enough to read a newspaper. That was the last encounter we had with those red lights. Part of me regrets not walking that extra 25 yards to see over the top of that ridge. Another part of me is just happy I didn't. Has anyone else ever heard or experienced a bright red light like this before in the woods? I'd love to hear about it in the comments below. So, when I was younger, I used to travel all around the US in a van and play shows. This story takes place in 2007 while traveling through the desert in, as cliche as it might sound, New Mexico late at night from one gig to the next. I was co-pilot to the driver, and we had at least 3 people in the back all awake. We were all kind of just hanging out and talking, and then we all noticed what looked like a car passing an overpass maybe a mile ahead of us. But it looked weird for some reason. I think we all knew there was no overpass way out here where we were. Then the car took a vert motion straight up in the air, almost like the shape of a vert ramp a skateboarder would ride on, only it went hundreds of feet in the sky. Then it basically did a barrel roll, And that's when we noticed it was 3 lights and not just 2 headlights or the profile of some car we originally thought we saw. The lights maintained a distance in front of us of about a mile ahead and kept doing the vert-shaped motions, like a giant U-shape right in front of us doing barrel rolls and turning around and repeating the motion. We all are freaking out in the van, needless to say. One person even woke up and was scared as hell. He didn't even know what to say. I think he just said, "What the heck?" over and over. This went on for what seemed like 5 minutes or so, but it definitely was minutes long. Not just a single minute. This thing put on a show. Then it seemed to go higher than normal, and it went above us and became one light, and we couldn't see it anymore. But me and the driver could see it in our side mirrors. Not the center mirror because we had a trailer, but it was behind us an equal distance as it was in front of us, but dead center behind us, low to the ground. It almost looked like a motorcycle on the highway at this point. Eventually, it just disappeared and faded away. This was my first encounter with lights, but not the last. This solidified my belief that there's something out there, and I haven't really looked back since. Does anybody else have similar stories as to mine? Please let me know. Peace and love, y'all. So, around 12 years ago, I went camping with a group of friends, around 7 of us. We were all sitting in a field having some drinks at around 2 a.m. when in the field I saw something coming towards us. It was a huge rectangular shape and moving at the speed of a sloth. Eventually, it ended up above us. It was around the size like 3/4 of a football field, completely rectangle. I am 98% sure the color was gray, but it was also 2 a.m., so not totally sure. Of course, at this moment, I'm thinking I'm totally drunk and this isn't happening. But as I gaze up at this huge rectangle machine, I can see door flaps, like those of a plane at the bottom, well, many of them, and a few lights, blue if I remember correctly. It was above us for about 2 minutes, and suddenly, it was gone. Like a click of the finger. At this point, I was convinced I was drunk and decided to go to sleep. The next morning, when I woke up, I said to my friends, there were 4 of us awake at the time, "Did anything happen last night?" And one explained exactly what I was thinking, and the others didn't make any talk about it. We never mentioned this situation ever again to each other, but it's always on my mind. What the hell was it? Just a thought. I figure I'd just mention it here. I was wondering if anyone else saw the same thing in their lives. They must admit it's pretty cool. I wasn't scared. I was more amazed at what the hell was happening than anything else. Also, one more point. It kind of sounded like a vacuum cleaner. A weird sound, right? But it's the only thing I could think of which sounded the same. When I was in my teens, my friends used to mess with motorbikes and take them to this private road. The quickest way around to this road on foot was by going through this field by going through this little subway hardly anyone used. There was a horse in that field I used to stroke all the time while watching my friends go by on their motorcycles. And then one day, we tried to go back down, but it was closed off with tents and men in black suits. Possibly MI5 or MIB. And they wouldn't let us even look closer. That same night, some local people that use the road for work deliveries say they saw a huge bright light, and one of the truckers reported it to the police. The same night, at like 5 a.m., people were banging on his door and he was taken away in a van or truck, and he was interrogated and stripped. He said the change was removed from his pocket, was all stuck together like it was magnetized. And after all this, they threatened him to the point of saying, "If you tell anyone about this, you'll be in big trouble," and made him sign some paperwork. This whole story didn't really come around until 15 years later. Back to that horse part. Basically, a local dog walker found that horse dissected in the very same field that's where the MIB came in and tented everything off. He said it was cut so neatly, like it had some kind of laser tool, and the organs neatly removed. So to think that the very same horse I used to stroke in my teens ended up being dissected by aliens is baffling. We are not alone, for sure. I'm a reporter for the news station, and have been assigned to report on that Area 51 raid today. I'm not going to reveal which station or who I am, otherwise, I just use Twitter or broadcast this to the public myself. When I got the assignment, I was not thrilled, to be honest. Who wants to be sent out to the middle of the desert at 3 in the morning to report on some internet joke? I honestly didn't think anybody would really show up. I figured it would just be me, and maybe a few other reporters standing around the open desert looking stupid with 5 weirdos. I will admit that I was wrong. There are more people here than I ever expected, but anyone here at all is more than I expected. There aren't thousands my producers had hoped for, but there are a few, maybe a little over 100 people, not including press and some police watching over things. They are mostly in their own groups scattered around the area, but people are actually here. At least I can interview a few and get some camera shots and get back to civilization before lunch. Let me give you a picture of where we are at. You travel a long 2-lane road in the middle of the desert before you take a left on another road leading you farther and farther away into the desert and far away from civilization. After another hour on this road, you take a right turn about a mile down the way, and there is where your meeting area is. The meeting area is basically an area they pulled off the road into the sand and decided this is the meetup point. When we got here, there was already a few other news stations and press already set up along the majority of the people who were planning on going on the raid. As the morning went on, more press arrived and another 4 cars of people who came to join the raid. That is when I noticed something odd. There was about 20 press vehicles, but only 10 other vehicles. There had to be at least 100 people out here ready to storm Area 51, and 4 of the cars that had arrived only had about 2 people in them. That left 6 cars to have brought around 100 people out there. Now, I was never good at math growing up, but I could easily see that there was more people here than cars could carry. I guess it is possible a bus may have dropped some of the people off and will come back to get them later. But would a bus company really drive this many people out to the middle of nowhere and leave them? I decided to ask around. I knew some of the others in the press were just typically working on some of the stories. It is a small yet competitive community, but we all are pretty friendly with one another. I found out from others who had arrived before me that most of the people planning to storm in were already here when we arrived, so nobody had an answer for how these people got here. That's odd. Not impossible, but just odd. After talking with the others, we all agreed we just wanted to get the story and go home before the sun came out, and the temperatures soared, turning this place into a living hell. I knew going into this that people I was going to meet today were not going to be pretty normal. Normal people wouldn't believe in aliens. Normal people don't take the internet jokes seriously enough to show up in random places. Normal people don't plan to storm a top-secret military base. Normal people don't show up in the middle of a desert in September. I knew going into this, I was walking into a storm of delusional conspiracy theorists who almost certainly have mental health issues. When I tell you that some of the people here are weird, I don't mean the expected crazy tinfoil hat kind of weird that you're thinking of. I mean, some of these people don't seem. There was just something off about them. I approached a group of stormers and asked them for an interview. A few of them looked at each other with a puzzled, almost anxious look before they whispered something to each other. Finally, one of the persons reluctantly agreed. "What is your name? And where are you from?" I asked. "My name? It is Theodore R. Washington, and I am from the state that you call Idaho," he said. "Idaho? How did you get here? Did you fly? Drive? When did you get in?" "We used an automobile and got here this morning before anyone else." "What is your plan? You only have a small pack. Did you bring enough water and food to survive? How long do you expect it to take?" "Water and food? It should not take long at all. That is all." That was my first interview. That is what I meant by weird. Who calls cars automobiles? And the name sounded fake, but everyone gives us fake names, so that's not too unexpected. The next person I interviewed was more normal. "I'm Alex from Vegas," he said, smiling. "I just wanted to see what would happen if anybody would actually show up. Can you believe that there are so many people here? This is crazy." Alex seemed normal. I asked him how he got here and he said he drove. Then asked about how there were so few cars here for the amount of people. "That is weird, man," he said. "They were all here when I got here, so who knows? Maybe they are all the aliens everyone is looking for." "Maybe, Alex. Maybe," I said to the camera. At least Alex seemed like he was just here for the laughs. The last person who would talk to me was a girl who said her name was Ann J. Frank. Again, what is it with these famous fake names and including the initial? In all my years of reporting, this has never happened. I guess today is the place I would most expect it. "What do you hope to accomplish today?" I asked. "We're going to rescue those imprisoned there," she said. "The aliens?" "Yes, that is how you refer to them as." "Okay. Assuming you reach Area 51 and somehow free the aliens you believe to be there, then what?" "We take them home," she said. "Home? To your house?" "Home," she said, staring at me like I was the crazy one here. "We're about to head out, so I can't answer any more questions." I looked up and she was right. The largest group had started to gather their stuff up and was walking towards the open desert. Some of them only carried a small backpack, but most of the group walked off in the desert with only the clothes they were wearing. I didn't see anybody with water, outside of possibly the few with water in their packs. We got the camera out and filmed them walking off like it was normal. Not everyone went. There were about 20 people left who just sat there hanging around watching them leave with us, Alex included. Eventually, people started to leave. The group had walked far enough off that where there was nothing left to stay for. First, the small group Alex was with and some of the press decided to go. Others soon followed, but I stayed behind. Finally, it was just me and the police. All the press vehicles were gone and all 10 cars had departed. Somehow, the entire group that left did not leave behind one single vehicle. It was probably smart on their part since they would be going to jail or dead by the heat later on today anyways. I talked to my cameraman and asked him what he wanted to do. We could leave like everybody else, or follow the stormers in our truck for a while and let's just see what happens. We are the news, so it is our job. We decided we would follow just a bit and stay far enough behind only to watch. Judging by the way they were packed, some of them may die out there in the heat, and there is no cell phone service to ask for help. We at least have a satellite connection if needed, a vehicle, and some water. We drove across the desert, and surprisingly the group had gotten much farther than I ever anticipated, and they had done it fairly quickly. Maybe too quickly. We were driving, and it took us almost an hour to catch up. We weren't going fast over this terrain, but we weren't going slow either. There is no way this large group of people can walk that fast in these conditions. We slowed down and drove to the side to stay away from the group. We wanted to watch them, not to be a part of them. And on they marched through the heat, still wearing nothing but the clothes on their back and no water in sight. I'm hot and thirsty, and I'm in an air-conditioned van. I can't imagine being out there with them. The fenced-off military area and gate were much closer than we realized. It couldn't have been much more than 10 miles from the gathering point. As the stormers approached, we could all see the military had guards posted at the gate and behind it. The stormers stopped in front of the gate as the two sides stared each other down. It looked like some of the stormers approached the fence and were talking to the military. We were too far away to be able to know what was being said. All we could do was watch. My partner got his camera out and zoomed in to get a better view when I watched on. I could look down to see the monitor, but I preferred to watch the entire group as a whole. The leaders of the stormers returned back to the group, and it looked like they were discussing what to do next. Looking at the monitor, the military had started to form up with their guns behind the gate, making sure nobody tried to rush the gate. At the moment, while a little tense, everything was peaceful. I turned to the cameraman and told him how I pray we do not have to witness any massacre of these civilians. Truly, they may have been odd. They didn't deserve to get murdered out here, though. He agreed and said, let's hope if anything happens, some people just wind up in jail. Then it started. The leaders of the stormers started to approach the gate and the group behind followed closely. They were not running and trying to rush the gate. They were simply calmly walking towards the gate. I could see in the monitor where the guards manning the gate had their weapons up and were yelling at them to stand down or they would shoot. There was a panic in the guard's face. It was not a face of fear, but a face of not wanting to have to kill somebody who didn't listen. In that moment, I felt a deep sympathy for the soldiers. They did not want to fire on the civilians, but they did have to follow orders if the stormers didn't listen. It was not a position I ever wanted to find myself in. Maybe that is why I never cared one bit to join the military. The guards continued to yell at the stormers who were quickly approaching the gate.
Stop, turds!
The guards manning the gate backed up as they approached. They were not going to shoot unless they crossed over the gate, it looked like. Suddenly, a crack rang in the air as one of the soldiers fired a shot. Nobody went down. It was a warning shot, but the stormers didn't stop. The first of the stormers came to the gate and started to climb. The soldiers on the other side continued to yell. By reading their lips through the monitor, you could see them yelling, "Stop!" and "We will shoot!" but it had no effect on the stormers. They didn't care. They climbed the fence and went right over the barbed wire like it wasn't there, while others climbed over the gate. The soldiers backed up with their guns raised. The first ones over the gate started to approach the soldiers when shots rang out. Bang, bang, bang! Some of the stormers in front fell down. I can't believe what I was seeing. Are you getting this, Mike? I asked. He was recording. More shots echoed through the hot desert air as the stormers continued to climb the fence. The soldiers appeared to be backing up and taking cover behind some of the buildings. I watched silently as the stormers continued to cross the fence and continuing to climb into the military complex. I looked at the dead stormers on the ground who had been the first ones to storm the gate. Why would they do that? And why didn't the others stop? This is going to be a massacre and a black eye on the United States history. The day the military killed over 100 civilians trying to find out aliens at the military base. They kept moving forward, and more shots rang out, knocking down one after another. Then something happened. The ones who had been shot and fell down started to get back up and walking forward. More shots crackled through the air and more went down, and just as quickly, the stormers got back up. What the hell was going on here? Area 51 is under attack. The soldiers fell back farther into the base, and the last of the stormers had crossed over the fence. In the distance, I could see something approaching in the sky behind the soldiers. It was attack helicopters. I didn't know if I should feel relieved that help was on the way, or feel terrified of what is about to come to those stormers on the ground. The helicopters started to fire, but not at the stormers on the ground. They were firing at something in the sky. I looked up to see if I could see what they were firing at, but it was an empty sky. Overhead, I heard a loud bang as a jet crossed the sound barrier, creating a sonic boom. I couldn't see them or what they were fighting against, but they were there. There is no doubt about it. We were under attack. I turned to the cameraman Mike and told him we had enough and we needed to get the hell out of there. He was already in the driver's seat and speeding away before I could even buckle my seatbelt. You got it all right? I asked. We're going to break the biggest story in history of history. We're going to be famous for this, you know. Yeah, I got it, was all he could say. We were both still in shock. We got back to the original gathering place, and there were military police waiting for us. Shit, I said. I knew what was about to happen. There was no way they were going to let us out of there with the footage. We tried to lie and say we didn't film anything, but they were too smart for that. They searched our truck and found everything. They took it all. They didn't even let us keep the interviews we did earlier, so we got nothing. We are finally getting back to the area with cell phone service, and while I can't broadcast this to the world or even the news stations, I can talk about it here. They will know, but without any of the footage. I will just come off as one of those crazy conspiracy theorists I interviewed earlier. Update. Wait a minute. It's Saturday? That's impossible. We were only gone maybe 2 hours max following them to the gates before heading back. Where the hell did the rest of Friday go? How is an attack on Area 51 not everywhere right now?